This story originally appeared on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Visit www.theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football for a 30-day free trial and 50% off an annual subscription. Different side, different system. A simple message, but one which most wouldn't expect to hear from Sean Dyche. Sometimes teams become defined by stereotype, or are perceived to have just a single style of play. And those are labels which have been applied to Burnley since they returned to the Premier League. But the first 3 games of this season have shown the shades of variation within Dyche's side which challenge the assumption it's often subjected to. Against Southampton on the opening day of the season, Burnley failed to implement any kind of effective press. Ashley Westwood and Jack Cork struggled in midfield, and Burnley were vulnerable to Southampton's raiding wingbacks. The Saints held the initiative, and the gap between Burnley's front 2 and the supporting players was much too wide in the first half. Now, Burnley did eventually get control of that game, running out comfortable 3-0 winners, but the second halves against Wolves and Arsenal were far tougher, when their primary aim wasn't about creating opportunities but holding on to what they had. It's been interesting to observe the tweaks Dyche has made during the opening weeks of the season. Plenty of work has been done to identify key areas in which his players can expose the opposition and exert themselves within those games. Against Southampton, the press was less obvious, indicated by the average position of their players during the course of that 90 minutes. Only 3 Burnley players spent most of their time in the opposition half, and perhaps that was a reaction to the kind of high-paced, quick transition football that Ralph Hasenhüttl prefers to play. His Southampton remain a work in progress, but their aim, which Burnley seemingly recognised and denied, is to force rapid counter-attacks. The performance against Arsenal was the opposite, with only 3 of Burnley's outfield players occupying an average position in their own half. They may not have come away with any points, but their pressing, particularly in that first period, was excellent, and it kept them in the game. Dyche and his coaching staff had evidently identified Arsenal's passing out from the back as a weakness and a vulnerability to target. As The Athletic highlighted at the time, it was a tactic shown best by Eric Peters' performance, and in how much further forward he was, making 5 of his 6 tackles in Arsenal's half. It was a strategic theme replicated across the side though, with most of Peters' teammates playing 5 to 10 yards higher than they had done against Southampton. It led to a much higher pressing line, and a week later at Molineux, Dyche employed what initially looked to be a similar plan against Wolves. But there were subtle differences, and had it not been for a contentious 97th minute penalty, that well-executed game plan would have been rewarded with 3 points. On the Friday before the game, Dyche had spoken about Wolves' capacity to vary their approach, noting that while Nuno Espirito Santo's side are comfortable playing their way out of defence, they're also capable of being more direct, targeting their wingbacks with diagonals, as well as their front 2 of Raul Jimenez and Diogo Jota. It was an observation which proved correct. In the first half, Wolves deviated from their associated style, with goalkeeper Rui Patricio repeatedly sending the ball long, looking for his wingbacks as Wolves tried to create chances from second ball opportunities. But Burnley were prepared, snapping into challenges and winning those 50-50 tackles. Time and again in the opening period, they were first to a second ball or quick to capitalise on errant passes before breaking with pace and conviction. It was a clear point of emphasis and an obvious variation on the approach used at Arsenal the previous weekend. Burnley encouraged Wolves to go long, inviting them to play towards their own traditional strength. The high press was still evident though, with Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes splitting the central defenders. Unlike Arsenal, however, Wolves were reluctant to play intricately out of their own defensive third, opting instead to go longer. Arsenal played far more passes around their own area, inviting Burnley further forward and allowing them to seize back possession. In both games in the first half, Burnley won the ball back high up the pitch. The difference was the manner in which they did. Instead of intercepting forward passes or not allowing Arsenal players any time to turn, against Wolves, it was about retrieving those second balls. Its effectiveness was shown early in the game, when Matt Loughton stole possession on Wolves' left, before snapping forward and creating a chance which Ashley Barnes curled just wide. And again later, when a turnover ahead of the visiting box was converted into a swift counter, from which Barnes eventually volleyed Burnley into the lead. "We try and adjust accordingly," said Dyche. but much more than people think, because it's obviously Sean Dyche, it's 4-4-2 of course. The idea is we do adapt and twist it more in-house than people think to go and deliver. More performances like this, and that in-house work may begin to get more credit. The script for this video, written by Andy Jones, was originally featured on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Whether it's more tactical insight, dedicated local reporting about your team, or rich storytelling from around the world, you'll find it all in one place. And there's a second part to today's story. To read Andy's deeper perspective into Eric Peters' performances, get a 30-day free trial by visiting theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football and get 50% off if you sign up for an annual subscription. To support Tifo, support The Athletic. Thank you for watching.